I am so delighted to be here to interview a remarkable thought leader and recognized and respected expert on entrepreneurship, job creation, and racial wealth equity. He is the president and CEO of Prosperity Now, a DC based national nonprofit focused on creating an economy that works for everyone. Please welcome the incredible Gary Cunningham.
Well,
Hello,
thank you
Gary.
for that. Well, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I am so humbled by it.
Right, Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you please tell us about your journey in relation to anti racism?
Well, I was actually raised on the same block where George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And in that city, the disparities between people of color and white people are some of the worst in the country, in the state of Minnesota, in the city of Minneapolis. And so growing up there, I was brutalized by the police. I was kept back in many ways because I couldn't access opportunity. The neighborhood I lived in was mostly black and was redlined. There were very few food options in the community, so we had to go outside. And even the ambulance to come get you when you were ill discriminated based on race. So in every aspect of our society here in the United States, I've felt the even at 50 years after the civil rights legislation was passed, black people and other people of color in the U.S. are unequal. And that's why we do the work we do at Prosperity Now. We are focused like a laser beam to create a world that works equally well for everyone. And we do that by focusing on economic inequalities for people of color in this country.
Right, so why is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination so important?
Well, number one, this issue is not just in Minneapolis or in the United States. This issue of race and how race and skin color has been used to keep some people out and other people in the circle of human concern. So this day is important because of all of those human beings that have come before us who have sacrificed much for us to be here. In 2001, I participated in the UN World Conference, hosted by the High Commissioner of Human Rights at that time. And I wanted my hats off to Michelle Bachelet for her work on continuing this struggle. But the World Conference was so important because what it did was it highlighted all of the nations in the world except two, Israel and the United States, who pulled out, participated in a document that actually indicated that we need to address not only racism, but we need to have reparations for what has happened for African nations, folks in Europe and Asia, and throughout the world to address that. And so this work continues. It's a struggle. So part of this work is focused on how do we address racism. And the outcome of racism is unequal treatment based on skin color, but not just treatment, it's also systems and structures that keep some of us out of the picture to fully participate in our communities and our society.
Right, thank you so much, Gary. You talk about reparations, but is there any other general progress being made towards anti racism globally?
Yes, the reparations that are in the UN document that came out of the Durban conference really talk about worldwide reparations. So it's not just based on the United States of reparations. It's really reparations for colonialism that and neocolonialism that has happened in the planet. And if you look at Thomas Pickering's work on capital and ideology, he's done a detailed study of economic inequalities throughout the world. And one of the things that he found was that we're not investing in people, that a small percentage of people in the world own most of the resources and control most of how those resources get allocated. And unless we have some way to redistribute those resources in a fair way that's not based on race, we will not get to the day where everybody can actually live up to their full potential.
Mm. Thank you. So, what can be done specifically to address the racism that arises in the context of military conflict?
Yeah, well, with regards to military conflict, and we're seeing it now, and I think it's happening all throughout the world. We're seeing it in the Ukraine, and my heart goes out to the folks in the Ukraine that are fighting a valiant and historic fight for their own freedom. But we're also seeing, I think many of us saw and witnessed African students leaving, attempting to leave the country and not being allowed to be on a train. And we're told specifically, directly, that it was their skin color, that the reason that they couldn't be put on the train when animals and others were being put on that train. And we're also seeing it in Europe where, there's a different standard for refugees when it comes to other Europeans, but it's a standard that's different for other folks coming from other parts of the world into Europe. So these issues are not new. They are a continuation of something that's happened for many centuries. And what countries need to do is when those behaviors happen, when there's dynamics of how policy happens, and in the United States is a clear example of that, we need to actually step up. We need to get into the streets and actually let our voices be heard in our democracy. And we need to have legislation that actually ensures that we can all participate fully. In the United States, as an example, but throughout the world, the tax structure and how taxes are structured actually have a lot to do with economic inequalities based on race. And so we actually need to change some of the structures internationally and nationally in order to change the dynamic of what's happening. Because if you can't participate in our system of capitalism in the United States and in Europe, then you really can't participate in our democracy more fully, in part because you're not a part of the full system. And we need to have a social contract. We used to have one. And that contract says if you work hard, you do the right thing, you should be able to do well in any of our communities, both nationally and internationally. And that contract has been broken. And so we need to repair the contract with our citizens that says for a young person, if you don't feel like you can really participate in our society and you have police that are over policing your communities, and you have in the United States, we have more people in prison than any industrialized nation in the world. And most of those people are Black and brown people. Then we have a system that's not going to work well for everyone. And so I'll just put it like this. If we were all in a mall together, say we're in a shopping center together, and opportunity is on the third floor, we need to really harness different strategies to get to the third floor. Well, some of us can take the stairway, others can take the elevator, others can take the escalator. But if you're in a wheelchair, you only have one conveyance. You have the elevator. Well, you don't hear anybody saying, let's not build elevators, because we all benefit from that. And so it really has to be focused on what are our universal goals? And then how do we have different strategies to get there? And not everyone is situated to opportunity in the same way. So we need to target our strategies and ensure that everyone can get to the third floor or to opportunity in this case. So that's really what we need to focus on. And if we focus on that, everyone can do better in our society. But we won't get there unless we actually stand up and allow ourselves to be empowered to change the trajectory of this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. I think the last thing is, what is the most important message you want to get across to people who are watching this show today?
Well, one of the most important messages I want to get on is that the current path we're on isn't sustainable, either from a climate perspective and a human relationship perspective. If in fact you who are listening to me now, don't expand your circle to ensure that there's people that are different from you in your circle, That is one of the best ways that you can go about ensuring that you address some of the underlying conditions that we have. And then work, organize to address systems change within your community so we can all participate and live up to our human potential. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much.